I read 11 books in the month of October. That is a little bit insane. So I figured we'd just go through some of these and I'll tell you a little bit about them. The first book that I finished was Dracula. This is a reread for me, and I started this on Halloween and didn't finish it in one day. I finished it on November the 1st. Dracula is one of those books that you can just revisit over and over and over again, and you're going to come across something new every single time. It is a vampire story, of course. It is the original Dracula story. It was based off of Carmilla, which I still have not read. But we follow Jonathan Harker as he is going to help Dracula with some legal paperwork. And Jonathan Harker's fiancée Mina and her best friend Lucy get caught up in Dracula's web of vampirism. We have Van Helsing and ultimately a hunt for Dracula. There's really just so much packed in this book, from the roles of the feminine in society to a critique of the excesses of the wealthy. There's just so much packed into this little book. I'm really love this edition. I got this in a set of quite a few. I think there are six books in a set that I got from Costco, and I just think that this is just kind of a really cool edition. But if you have, there's also some interior paperwork. But if you have never read Dracula, I highly recommend it. It's a great spooky season read, but it's also just a great classic to read anytime because it is just so packed full of really great information, and you'll pick up on something new every single time that you read it. The next book that I read was All of Us Murderers by K.J. Charles. This was basically what would happen if the Hardy Boys were gay and went to a fake gothic mansion, and there were ghosts to solve a mystery. This book was absolutely fantastic. It exceeded my expectations. We are following Zeb Wickham, who has been summoned to this mansion of a relative that he doesn't really actually know very well. And this home is a Gothic manor, but it's not a true Gothic manor. It's a fake Gothic manor. It is built just to look like a Gothic manor. And this aging relative has brought 3 different members of the family to this mansion to sort of hash out his inheritance. So as you can imagine, there is some backstabbing. There's just all sorts of things going on. And while Zeb is in this house with this relative that he really doesn't know very well, an inheritance that he really doesn't care about, he discovers that his ex-lover is in service to this relative. So there's all sorts of hijinks that play out. This is kind of like a Knives Out type of story, but just absolutely a fun, raucous romp through a fake Gothic mansion. I highly recommend, and this was an aardvark choice for me. I've been trying to make my way through all of the Book of the Month books that I have ever ordered, and Queen of Thieves is one that I got a few years ago, and the premise was really interesting. It's based on an actual group of women who were thieves, and so I was expecting something really fantastic and interesting. Edgar wants to participate. I was expecting something really fantastic and interesting, and instead this one just left me kind of cold. I didn't finish it. This ended up being a DNF for me. I had so much hope for this. It's 1946, post-war, people are struggling, but the writing style and the pacing just really left something to be desired, and I DNF'd about 50% of the way through. Hazelthorn by C.G. Drews. I don't normally pick up a lot of YA. I generally find that the protagonists are not very relatable. I mean, I'm 48 years old, so there has to be something that sort of makes YA a little bit more connected to a wider view than teenagers in order for me to really connect and enjoy it. And C.G. Drews, I think, did a great job with really making this not teenager-centric, even though our main characters are teenagers. This was another Book of the Month selection for me, and it's one that just came out. I know that that this author had a previous book, Don't Let the Forest In. I have not read that yet, but I do plan on reading it after I have read this one. So we're following Evander in this book, who has been shut up in this big house and really kept under wraps, and there's a garden outside that wants sacrifice in order to return wealth. And Evander's character, even though he's a teenager, I think gave us a lot of characteristics that even adults can relate to. Loneliness, lack of purpose, feeling ill. There's definitely chronic illness vibes going on here. And there is another boy. Apparently the garden almost killed Evander when he was younger. And there is another boy in this story who comes in, and we find out that a lot of the things that we thought that we knew that were going on in this house and with this boy and with Byron, who's sort of the benefactor, the head of household here, are not what we thought they were at all. I found this story to be creepy and eerie, and there were moments where I was holding my breath, and I really just enjoyed this one. If you like that kind of odd sort of gothic horror or nature horror, then you will probably really enjoy this book, despite the fact that it is YA. I think that it is really good for adults as well. Lightbreakers was, I hate to say that it was my favorite book of the month because I have so many good ones coming up in the list, but Lightbreakers is definitely one of those books that's just going to sit and live with me. I absolutely loved it. It completely ripped my heart out. We are following a married couple, Maya and Noah. Noah is a scientist, Maya is an artist, and I really loved the blending of science and art that shows up in this book. Noah has lost a daughter when she was 4 years old with his ex-wife, and he and Maya are a newly formed couple post loss of child, so their dynamic is a little bit different. Serena, who's a child that was lost, is definitely a ghost in their relationship, and Maya's working for a museum. She's kind of doing sort of what she wants in life, but she really wants to get back to creating art, and Noah really wants to do something significant with his life. So when he is presented with an opportunity to join a sort of time travel scientific research study in the middle of nowhere, Texas, he jumps at the chance, and Maya, with her love for Noah, says yes. So they travel to the middle of nowhere, Texas, and Noah is lured there because they say, oh, we based all of our research off of a paper that you wrote that people really teased you for and really didn't like. So he's just immediately roped in and really wants to join in this research study. And we find out that it's time travel. And so we end up with a bunch of questions, like what lengths will you go to reconnect with those that you have loved and lost. We get a really interesting look at who did you want to be versus who did you become? Who did you set out to be? We have some reconnecting with previous relationships. Noah ends up contacting his ex-wife because he says, hey, we can go visit Serena. With all of this going on, Maya really feels kind of lost and disconnected from Noah, and ends up going to visit her parents in Japan and reconnecting with an ex-boyfriend of hers who is also an artist. So we get kind of these glimpses back in time for these two characters to find out who was it that they wanted to be, who did they set out to be before life happened to them, and where do they end up in the end? What kind of pull does love have for another person, for a spouse, for an ex, for a child? And it really brought in up a lot of deep thoughts and kind of those really sinking into those ideas. And this was a great love story, it was a great science story, it was a great art story, and really just a great piece of lit fic. And I haven't really heard very many people talking about it, which is very surprising because I thought it was amazing. Cursed Daughters, and I'm not even going to try to say her name because I know I will do her beautiful name absolute injustice. But we have a Nigerian author who is writing a very Nigerian-centric tale about 3 women, all who have been cursed. And this was a very, very highly anticipated book. I started it a while back with an arc, and I was having a lot of trouble getting into it. And once I had kind of the physical book in my hand, that completely changed, and I was really able to dig into this book and dig into the characters. So at the very beginning, we have a woman who walks into the water and drowns. And on that same day, her sister has a baby daughter who ends up looking exactly like this drowned sister. And we get a really fun look into the relationship between these 3 women in Nigeria, and not only their relationship to each other, but a lot of the social placement that they are dealing with in Nigeria and their relation to the men in their lives. And supposedly they are all cursed, that they cannot have a great relationship with a man, and the storylines that unravel and the connections between these women and people that they know, and the weight that that Inye has to deal with, as she's considered to be like the ghost or the reincarnation of her cousin Monife, who is the one who drowned. There's really a lot of heavy themes, but I found myself laughing out loud at times. I found myself falling in love with these women and really just sinking into their story. And so if you like reading diversely from other cultures and getting a glimpse into other cultures, I highly recommend this. If you like lit fic, if you like women's fiction, I highly recommend this. It was just a fantastic book, and the cover is fantastic. Good Girl by Aria Aber is another one of those books that had all of the elements that should have been a wonderfully fantastic book. We are in Berlin's artistic underground. We're following a group of young adults, teenagers to a little bit older, who are spending their nights in drug-addled raves, listening to techno music, and really just waxing poetic about the angst in their lives, and really, all of the societal things that are going on at the time. And that part of the story, I think, was a little bit too heavy-handed. We have a little bit too much techno, sex, and drugs. The other story that is in this book was astounding, and it is what I was hoping for from this book. We have Nyla, who is her parents are Afghan refugees, and they have come to Germany to escape what is going on in Afghanistan. And Nyla is embarrassed for her heritage. She tells people that she's from Greece, and she spends most of the book trying to run away from who she is and who her parents are, and really dealing with identity. And yes, the other portion of this book, the relationship that she gets into, that is definitely a grooming relationship. So be forewarned with some triggers there. She is definitely being groomed by an older man. Looking at what her friends are doing versus what she is doing, and really just watching her try to unravel her own identity, is tied in with the decisions that she makes for the sex, drugs, and techno. I just wish that it had been a little bit more balanced towards Nyla's story and not towards sort of the illicit activities. It was a little overdone on that side. So this book was okay. I would say definitely check your trigger warnings before you read this book, because there is a lot of drug use. Yes, Ranger, we will definitely check trigger warnings. I did a reread of Emma for a book club that I am in, and this is this is Ranger. There are only 2 books that I ended up annotating as reading this month. They were both rereads for me. Emma hit me very, very differently this time around in my latter 40s versus when I read it last time as a 20-year-old. When I was 20 years old, I found Emma to be extremely annoying. I did not like this book at all. I read it in college, and I just found her to be annoying and pretentious, and this was my least favorite Jane Austen book. As I've reread it as an adult, I've come to a lot of realizations that Emma is not the annoying one in this book. There is definitely an annoying character in this book, Mrs. Elton. She is the pretentious Karen of a character that I ended up not liking this time, and I found myself adoring Emma. And I think the reason is that 28 years later, I see Emma not as pretentious and annoying and a meddler as she is trying to go around and do all of this matchmaking and fixing people up and making wrong decisions and really sort of seeing people in the wrong light and making incorrect assumptions about who likes who and getting people's feelings hurt. I really saw her as immature. She's only 21 in this book, so she has a lot of life to learn. And throughout the book, we see that Emma starts to learn some of these lessons. She starts to grow up. And as she starts to grow up and the romance with Mr. Knightley starts to creep into the pages, we really start to see Emma come into her own. And I don't know if this is at the top of my favorite Jane Austen novels yet, but I think it could be as I sit with it longer. I think Pride and Prejudice will probably always be my favorite, but this is definitely creeping up there. I would say probably Pride and Prejudice, and then Emma, and then maybe Persuasion. I should probably do a ranking of all of the Jane Austen books at some point after I've gone through and reread her entire catalog, which is on my TBR to do over the next year or two. But if you haven't read Emma in a long time, or you didn't like Emma the last time you read it, you might give it another try with a little bit of wisdom and experience behind you. And the next book I read is The Place Where They Buried Your Heart by Christina Henry. I'm going to fully admit that I picked this a lot because of the cover. This cover is absolutely amazing. This is a haunted house story. We have a boy that has been eaten by a haunted house, and his sister and family are living still nearby this house for the entire length of this story. And the house has really come alive, and it eats other people. And really, for a horror story about a haunted house, there was so much character development in this story. I found myself just really rooting for Jessie, who is the sister in the story, as she experiences loss after loss after loss, and fear after fear after fear. And the found family that is in this neighborhood surrounding this house that just looms over everything. And as it gets stronger, it stretches out further. And it was really very surprising for a horror story to have really that much character development. So I found myself just breezing through this one. It was a very, very quick read. This was another Aardvark selection. And yeah, if you like kind of a lit fic horror style of book, definitely highly recommend that one. I've been working on Plato's Republic, a reread for the last, I want to say I started it this summer, but with sort of all of the things going on in the world, I felt that this was a good time to revisit the Republic, and I remembered why this book has so many things that I disagree with and so many things that I do agree with. What we are looking at in Plato's Republic is kind of that question-answer style philosophical discussion, where Plato is writing about things that that Aristotle had discussed, and we're trying to find the best form of government, the most just form of government, the most moral form of government. And when we're talking about morals in Plato's Republic, we're not talking about morals like what we think of morals today. When we talk about morals, we're talking about justice. And this is a very heavy read. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of... The dogs are just going crazy today. There's a lot of ideas posed as questions, and then Aristotle responding yes, or I agree, or I disagree. It's a little bit of a heavy read, but as we are looking at world governments changing and crumbling, and the government here in the United States really being fairly non-functional, it's a really great thing to visit. And if you have never read The Republic before, I highly recommend it. There are a lot of things that I agree with. I agree that with his definitions of a dictator, I agree with a lot of the things that he poses as far as how we should educate people and some of the basis for morality. But some of the things that I highly disagree with is this idea that Plato poses, which was controversial then and it's controversial now. But the guardians of the ideal city, ideal society that they are building in this thought project in the book, the guardians should only have communal families, that they should share women, children, food, property, all of this kind of stuff. And that is just kind of gross and creepy. And he really, really hates poetry because it is something that is made up. He really dislikes Homer. And so there's a lot of things that I disagree with. There's a lot of areas in this book that really make me mad. But it is a really interesting thought experiment to visit, because what they are trying to do is build the perfect society. And we see kind of how they put those building blocks together. And I think in this time frame, this day and age, we can look at that and say, okay, this is where the formation of X government went wrong, because they made this theoretical leap, or this logical leap. I think the first logical misstep that I see in the Republic is that we start off with a very small group of people who are sharing everything. People have tasks that they do. It's based on their strengths. It's based on the things that they do well. Some people are farmers. Some people are artisans. Some people are caregivers. Some people are doctors. And everyone works together to form this society. And then we make this logical leap for this imaginary point where we have too much. And now we need to start guarding the extra that we have. I think that's kind of a logical misstep in the book, and it happens very early on. And I think there are a lot of missteps that are built on this idea that we need to protect what's ours. So if you've never read The Republic, I do recommend it, but keep in mind it is a tough and difficult read. And then the last book, which I just finished on November the 30th, is The Strength of the Few. The Will of the Many is one of my favorite books of all time. I was chomping at the bit to get The Strength of the Few. And I've seen a lot of criticism for this book online so far. And I'm going to say I do not agree with the criticism. We're still following this. I am not going to give anything away in this review. But we are following this in 3 different points of view. So we have 3 different points of view, but all of those points of view are this. It does get a little bit confusing at times. If you're listening to the audio, there really is no indication of where we are switching from one vis to another. In the book, we have kind of a blank page that indicates that there is a change. I believe that this is supposed to be a trilogy, and knowing that this is book 2 or the middle book, I went into it with the expectations of it being a middle book, and that is exactly what was delivered. It is exactly the middle book that I would expect from James Islington with this particular storyline. We ended The Will of the Many with a major cliffhanger. We end The Strength of the Few with me just dying for book 3, and since this one just came out, I know it's going to be a while. I'm not going to talk at length about this book because there's not a whole lot that I can say without giving away plot if you haven't read The Will of the Many, but I do so recommend this series. It is absolutely amazing, and if you go into this expecting that this is a middle book, it is a book 2, it will deliver exactly what you are expecting. So leave me a comment down below and let me know what was your best and worst read for November, and give me some suggestions, maybe based on the books that I absolutely loved this month. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as Ranger just asked you to do, and I will see you next time. Bye.